Logan the Layman Critic here. Today we review Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2. It's from 2012 and directed by Jay Oliva. It's Gotham City in the 1980s and crime is escalating because of a gang called the Mutants. Batman emerges from retirement to take on the new threat. Meanwhile, a young girl named Carrie is inspired to take on the persona of Robin and fight crime by his side. I love Frank Miller's graphic novel, Dark Knight Returns. I love his take on Batman. I think it's the closest the modern comics ever got to resembling the character in his earliest incarnation. The graphic novel is divided into a two-part film adaptation, as I mentioned before. There is a later release that has it as one big film, but I think it does work better broken up. We will be reviewing both of them together, obviously, just for the sake of convenience here. It's a pretty faithful adaptation of the graphic novel with the usual unnecessary changes, or I should say usual necessary changes needed when going from one medium to another, but there is a few unnecessary changes in my opinion. I think a lot of the internal monologue from the comic was moved. That was too bad, but probably would have made the film come across as way too expository. There is one change they made that I absolutely hated. So, the graphic novel has a scene where the mutants have kidnapped a baby as a hostage. And Batman tracks the gang down and takes each of them out until there's just one mutant holding the baby at gunpoint. And it's a standoff between this hero and villain. The gang member's like, back off, man, I'll kill the kid, believe me, I will. And Batman just shoots the gang member dead, takes the baby into his arms and says, I believe you. And it's one of my favorite parts of the graphic novel because it shows the seriousness of the situation. Here you have Batman, a character that for years has been well established for not only avoiding the use of firearms, but also maintains a strict no-kill code. And he's faced with the dilemma of whether to kill a criminal in order to save an innocent life. And he doesn't hesitate. And it's shocking because it goes against expectation, but it's also satisfying because it doesn't feel inconsistent with Batman's character. He's morally justified with what he's doing because it's really not an act of vigilantism, because any one of us could be in that situation, and it makes sense that any one of us would probably do that, if we assuming we were a good shot. The animated film, unfortunately, it completely neuters this scene by having Batman just shoot the gun out of the criminal's hand and then knocking her out. And I'm not sure why they decided to deviate from the comic, but I hate that they did because it robs the scene of its dramatic weight. Peter Weller, who you might know as RoboCop, does the voice of Batman, and he's fantastic. And his delivery is not unlike his work in the RoboCop films, just in the Dark Knight's parlance. He's heroic, he's a hardened veteran of a war on crime, he's methodical, and he's weary from all the years. The casting was perfect. I don't think anyone could have done it better, not even Kevin Conroy. And I don't think this Batman is his Batman, Kevin Conroy's, which is fine. Let Conroy's Batman be its own thing. It's great in its own right. Ariel Winter plays Carrie Kelly, a.k.a. the new Robin. And like Weller, she captures the character with her voice work. I'm not generally a fan of Robin as a concept, but Frank Miller uses the character as more of an agent of Batman in Part 1 and less of a sidekick. It's still not perfect because she seems entirely too capable of a fighter, and we have no established backstory to explain why she can take on members of the most dangerous gang in Gotham. But I guess you just have to go with it. Like Batman Year One, this adaptation resembles the art style of its source material without being a copy of it. And like Year One, I think it's actually superior. The Dark Knight Returns is a little too rough around the edges for my liking, as much as I love it. The animation gives it some more definition by giving it more variety of color. My aforementioned quibbles aside, it's a faithful recreation of the graphic novel, whether it's Batman leaping through the air, driving through the junkyard in his Batmobile, or laying a beat down on the mutant leader. Every moment we see him grabs your eyeballs. Now on for part 2. After Batman reemerges and defeats the mutants, the Joker comes out of his catatonic state and begins killing again. With the government opposed to Batman's activities, the problem goes all the way to the top in the White House, where the president has charged Superman with the task of stopping the Dark Knight. Part 2 is when The Dark Knight Returns really starts to shine. You've got the Joker back as the villain, and boy, does he live up to that status of villain. He murders his shrink by slashing his throat with a broken mug. He kills an audience and talk show host with his laughing gas. He goes on a shooting rampage at a carnival. In another bit of unnecessary alterations, the graphic novel actually has him poisoning a bunch of Cub Scouts with cotton candy. Given that this film is intended for an older audience, I saw no reason for its removal, but that's what they did. Michael Emerson gives the Joker's voice a different feel from everyone that's come before, and I would say even maybe after. His voice is almost... And I don't know if this is really Emerson, just his voice in general, but his performance anyway is almost feminine in a way, and soft-spoken at times. The insanity part of the character is subdued in his delivery when you compare it to someone like Mark Hamill, which everyone will inevitably compare him to. But it is nonetheless present, and it's effective. It's a very sinister performance. I wouldn't say it's the best take on the character, but Emerson has earned his place in the pantheon, in my opinion. Mark Valley voices Clark Kent, Superman, and it reminds me a little bit of Tim Daly's work in the role, though it seems less commanding and more gentle, which I think is kind of what the script calls for. These two superheroes are both older men now. Time and experiences have changed them, but in different ways, because Batman has gotten more hardened and aggressive, whereas Superman has become softer. It's so soft that he's become the president's lapdog. And that's actually an interesting thing about part 2, is the satire. The president, who is obviously supposed to be Ronald Reagan, is depicted as a caricature. He's a jingoistic opportunist who calls Superman a good boy. There's moments where I think it's a little too cartoonish when it comes to the voice work, and then again, the film did change his appearance in the comic from wearing this star-spangled suit to, the more conventional attire of Ronald Reagan, presidential attire. It's less loud. So, I guess it balances out. But the left doesn't get spared by Frank Miller. You get characters like Dr. Wolper and his psychobabble justifications for criminal behavior, sort of serving as a counterpoint to the vigilante extremes of Batman and former mutants that have turned into the sons of Batman. And I, for one, enjoy the satirical element of The Dark Knight Returns. I like its equal opportunity approach toward lampooning American politics. Since part 2 already has Batman back on the job, we get to spend more time seeing him in action, and it's glorious. We get a cool scene where Batman disguises himself as an old lady to take out a neo-Nazi chick. There's a rooftop fight with the cops, a chase through an amusement park, Superman taking on the Soviet army and getting nuked, a duel between Batman and Superman in Crime Alley. And here's a tip. If you were disappointed by Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, watch this movie to cleanse your palate. Hey, even if you liked that movie, you should still watch it. It's awesome. So Batman The Dark Knight Returns is one of the greatest animated Batman films, adapting one of the greatest graphic novels. Make sure you watch it. Make sure you add it to your collection. And thanks for watching.